So have you ever just woken up with this massive craving for sushi?
Oh, yeah. Like, absolutely need it right now.
Right. So you get in your car, you drive across town, you walk through the automatic doors of this building, march right up to the counter, and you just confidently order a spicy tuna roll.
Okay.
But the person behind the counter, they just stare at you. They look totally bewildered, and they say, well, look, we have hammers, we have nails, and we have power drills. We do not have spicy tuna.
Because you're in a hardware store.
Exactly. You are standing in a hardware store. And instead of realizing your mistake, your completely obvious mistake, you get absolutely furious.
Right. You just lose it.
You storm out, you leave this scathing one-star review, and you spend like the rest of the week telling anyone who will listen about how completely that hardware store failed you.
I mean, it sounds totally absurd when you frame it like that. Like, nobody would blame the hardware store for not serving sushi.
No, nobody would. Because the store hasn't failed you at all, right?
Mm.
It's functioning perfectly. It's doing exactly what a hardware store was built to do. You were just in the completely wrong building.
Yeah.
And you demanded a service it was never, structurally designed to provide. Now, I want you, and I mean everyone listening to this right now, to apply that exact same logic to the people in your life.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Because have you ever felt just completely and utterly exhausted by a friendship? Or, I don't know, deeply disappointed when a confidant, someone you really trusted, just didn't show up for you the way you expected them to?
For sure. I think we all have.
You get that sinking sensation, right? You start questioning the whole relationship, wondering if you did something wrong, or if they're just fundamentally flawed or selfish.
Right. It feels super personal.
But what if there was actually nothing wrong with you? And what if there was absolutely nothing wrong with them either?
Yeah.
What if you simply misunderstood their address in your life?
Man, that is, I mean, this is such a profound shift in how we view human connection. Because, we are so culturally conditioned to internalize relational disappointment as like a personal failing.
Like, I must not be lovable enough.
Exactly. Or we externalize it as a total betrayal, like, oh, they are just a terrible person. But removing that binary moral judgment, it just changes everything.
And that is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We are exploring this truly fascinating framework called relational topology.
Yeah, it's such a cool concept.
Specifically, we're unpacking part 2 of this work, which is sourced from the Spectrix Metaphysical Institute. And just to give you a little context, if you aren't familiar with this material, it's not some, dry, peer-reviewed psychology paper.
No, not at all.
It's actually written as a philosophical dialogue. The whole goal of this material is to help us understand what they call the architecture of human connection. We're going to map out how we relate to one another.
And we should clarify, we aren't doing this to put people in rigid little boxes.
Right. We are doing this to find actual sustainable freedom in our relationships.
Yeah, that context is really important. Because it is a dialogue, we're basically learning alongside the characters in the text. There's a character named Doc C who brings this incredibly analytical, almost architectural perspective to human behavior.
He's the map maker, basically.
Exactly. And then there's Christian, who acts as the student. He's essentially the proxy for us, right? Asking the clarifying questions when things get a bit too complicated.
Which we appreciate.
Totally. And then there's the mentor. This voice consistently elevates the conversation from just like mere structural observation into profound life wisdom. And the thematic baseline we really need to establish right here before we get into the weeds is that understanding this map of relationships isn't just a fun intellectual exercise. It isn't just categorizing the people in your life like you're organizing a filing cabinet. It is a fundamental shift in your personal perspective.
The source material makes that very clear right out of the gate. We aren't doing this to just slap labels on our friends so we can judge them more efficiently.
Yeah, the stakes are much higher than that.
It's about personal transformation. And there's a specific quote from the mentor that really anchors the mindset we need to have for this entire deep dive.
Yeah, the mentor opens the dialogue with this very striking statement. He says, there comes a moment when knowledge asks to become wisdom.
Knowledge asks to become wisdom.
Right. And what's fascinating here is the sharp distinction being made between those two concepts. Knowledge is simply having the map, like part 1 of their framework, which we aren't covering today, that gave them the map itself.
Right. The literal layout.
Exactly. But part 2 asks a much more difficult practical question, which is how shall we actually live once we know where everyone is located on that map? That is where wisdom enters the picture. Doc C follows this up by noting that Once you understand the underlying architecture of your relationships, you can no longer pretend that a relational collapse is just some random accidental tragedy.
Right. You can't just throw your hands up and say, well, I guess the universe just wanted us to stop being friends.
Yeah, no more playing the victim to the universe.
Doxy says that our interactions begin to change, not because the other people have changed their behavior, but because our perception of them has changed. We see the matrix, basically.
Yes, exactly.
And then Christian, the student, asks the perfect clarifying question. He says, so learning the map changes the traveler.
To which Doxy replies with what I truly believe is the guiding philosophy of our entire discussion today. He says that most people think maturity is learning more about others.
Right.
They think maturity is psychoanalyzing their friends, figuring out everyone's childhood traumas, and, collecting infinite data points so they can understand exactly why their friend is always 10 minutes late.
Which is exhausting, by the way.
So exhausting. But Doxy completely disagrees. He believes maturity is learning how to position ourselves wisely among others.
Okay, let's just sit with that for a second. Maturity is positioning.
Yeah.
It's about looking at the layout of your life, your internal city, so to speak,
Yeah.
and figuring out where you're standing in relation to everyone else.
Yeah.
It's taking ownership of your own coordinates.
Absolutely.
So if maturity is all about positioning, how do we actually figure out where people belong? How do we stop walking into hardware stores and demanding sushi?
Well, according to the source, we have to start by looking at the architecture itself.
Okay, let's lay it on us.
So the text introduces a foundational concept here, which is the first principle. Position inherently determines expectation. And honestly, if you take nothing else away from this deep dive, this realization alone can dramatically lower the temperature of your interpersonal conflicts.
Oh, for sure.
Doxy asserts that one of the greatest sources of pain and disappointment in our lives is misplaced expectation. We expect a bridge to become a harbor. We expect a casual acquaintance to suddenly act like a lifelong confidant.
We expect a coworker to operate like a covenant partner.
Yes.
Exactly that.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the urge to make everyone we like into a best friend is, so strong.
Oh, it's huge.
Right. When we meet someone at work and we vibe with them, we immediately want to upgrade their status. But when we treat a coworker like a covenant partner, and they inevitably fail to meet that massive expectation because, frankly, they're just a coworker, what do?
We freak out.
We get deeply offended.
Yeah.
We conclude that they're toxic or that they betrayed us.
Yeah, we assume a moral failure on their part. We think, how could they let me down like this? I would have done anything for them.
Right.
But Doxy challenges this entirely. He suggests that perhaps nothing is wrong with their character at all. We simply misunderstood their address.
Which goes back to the hardware store. Exactly. And the mentor chimes in here with another really grounding example. He says a hospital isn't a marketplace. If you go to a hospital looking to buy fresh produce, you are going to be disappointed.
Very disappointed.
And if you go to a marketplace looking for emergency surgery, you are going to die.
Jeez. Yeah, literally.
Right. Neither institution has failed. They simply serve completely different architectural purposes.
Architecture precedes expectation. I love that.
Yeah.
But I do want to push back a little here just for the sake of the listener who might be feeling a bit defensive right now.
Sure, go for it.
Because this sounds incredibly logical, almost clinical, right? But human beings are messy. Isn't there something a little pessimistic or even arrogant about deciding, oh, this person is just a bridge, or this person is just a marketplace?
That's a very fair point.
It feels like we are artificially limiting people. If I love someone, shouldn't I give them unlimited access to my inner life? Doesn't setting a boundary mean I'm essentially insulting their worth as a human being?
And that is precisely the tension the source material addresses next with the second principle. It's a trap that highly empathetic people fall into all the time.
Guilt-tripping ourselves for having boundaries.
Yes. Doxy makes a profound distinction to resolve this. He says we have to learn to honor position without inflating position. And to do that, we must understand the difference between equality of worth and equality of assignment.
Equality of worth versus equality of assignment.
Yeah.
Man, that is a massive distinction.
It's vital. Think of a city, right?
Ah,
Every district in a city has absolute value. The industrial district matters, the residential district matters, the financial district matters, but every district isn't identical. You don't build a tourist playground in the middle of an active shipping yard.
right. That would be a disaster.
Exactly. And Doc C lists these out so clearly. He says, your barber isn't your therapist, your accountant isn't your pastor, your mentor isn't your spouse, your client isn't your child. Every single one of those people has infinite, immeasurable human worth. They all deserve absolute dignity and respect, but their assignment in your life, their architectural position, is entirely different.
And confusion, pain, and relational breakdown begin when those boundaries disappear, which, let's be honest, happens all the time.
Oh, constantly.
We take the barista who makes our coffee every morning, someone we have a great, friendly rapport with, someone who possesses infinite human worth, and we suddenly decide to trauma dump our deepest insecurities on them while there's a line of 10 people behind us.
Yes, the classic barista trauma dump.
Right. They aren't equipped for that assignment. It's unfair to demand it of them just because they are a nice person. We are inflating their position.
Exactly. And when the barista looks uncomfortable and tries to end the conversation, we feel rejected.
We're like, wow, I thought we had a connection.
But they didn't reject our worth. They
Huh.
simply couldn't fulfill the inflated assignment. The mentor in the text says this so beautifully to address your earlier concern about setting boundaries feeling mean. He says, respect doesn't require proximity. Distance doesn't require rejection.
Respect doesn't require proximity. Distance doesn't require rejection. I really want you, the listener, to internalize that.
It's so powerful.
Because you can deeply respect someone, you can advocate for their earth, you can genuinely wish them the best, and you can still recognize that they belong in a district of your life that is further away from your core.
Yeah, they don't have to be in the inner sanctum.
Right. You don't have to have a dramatic falling out, a huge fight, or a cold rejection to shift someone from the confidant district back to the acquaintance district. You're simply recognizing their correct position and honoring it without inflating it.
Exactly. Because once we establish boundaries based on someone's position, we have to look very honestly at what that specific boundary can actually hold. If you do inflate the position, you run into structural failure.
Which leads right into principle 3.
Yes. Which the source calls relationship capacity. And this is where the framework gets incredibly practical.
Because even if you get the district right, even if you know someone is a genuine designated friend and not just a barista or a coworker, there is still the question of how much that specific friendship can actually carry.
Right. Doxy starts by defining what capacity is not. And this is crucial for shifting our personal perspective because it goes against almost every romanticized notion we have about human connection.
Okay, so what isn't it?
He says capacity is not love. Capacity isn't intelligence. Capacity isn't even desire.
Which feels completely counterintuitive. I mean, we're taught from a young age that if you just love someone enough, or if you both just want the relationship to work badly enough, it'll just magically sustain itself.
The whole love conquers all trope.
Yes. We equate emotional desire with structural capacity. We think, well, we love each other, so we should be able to co-found a business, live together, and talk every single day.
But Doxy strips all that emotional assumption away. He defines capacity simply and ruthlessly as what a relationship can faithfully sustain.
What it can faithfully sustain.
Yes. And to illustrate this, he uses what I consider the most powerful, visceral analogy in this entire document. He says, imagine asking a neighborhood street to carry interstate traffic. Eventually, everything breaks.
Oh, man. I really want to expand on this road analogy because it illuminates so much about our past relationship failures.
Go for it.
Imagine a quiet, two-lane street in a residential neighborhood, right? It's got speed bumps, it's got kids playing on the sidewalks, it's shaded by these beautiful old oak trees.
It's idyllic.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
It is a perfect neighborhood street. It's functioning exactly as it was designed to. But then you decide to reroute Interstate 95 right through it.
Oh, no.
You send thousands of massive 18-wheelers, speeding commuters, and heavy cargo trucks down this little two-lane road 24 hours a day. What happens?
I mean, complete structural collapse. The asphalt cracks and buckles, the speed bumps are obliterated, the environment becomes chaotic, dangerous, and completely broken.
Right.
But, and this is Doxy's core point, it didn't break because the road was poorly built. It wasn't a bad street. It broke because it was never designed for that volume of traffic.
It wasn't designed for the volume. That completely revolutionizes how we view our failing friendships. Because, look, we all have friends in our lives that are, structurally speaking, neighborhood streets.
Definitely.
They're wonderful for a Sunday afternoon stroll. They're great for a casual catch-up over coffee. But then we go through a massive life crisis, and we back up an 18-wheeler full of our heaviest emotional baggage, our deepest existential dread, and we drive it right over them.
And we just flatten the street.
Exactly. And when the friendship cracks under the pressure, when they pull away or give us bad advice, we get furious. We say they weren't a real friend or they couldn't handle me.
But the truth is, you overwhelmed their capacity. You asked a relationship to faithfully sustain a volume of traffic it was never architecturally designed to hold.
Wow, yeah.
Doxy points out that some relationships carry daily conversation. Those are your interstates. They're built for high volume, heavy emotional loads, and constant movement. But others only carry annual reunions, and here is the profound shift in perspective. Neither is deficient.
That is the key. The annual reunion friend isn't a worse friend than the daily interstate friend. They simply possess a different capacity.
Exactly.
I think this is incredibly freeing when it comes to setting healthy limits within our existing friendships. Because we so often feel guilty if we realize we only really enjoy seeing a specific friend once a month or even once a year.
Oh, the guilt is real. You think, I'm such a bad friend.
Right. We think, oh, I must be a terrible friend if I don't want to text them every day. We think the relationship is failing if it doesn't look like a high-speed interstate.
We judge the neighborhood street for not having 6 lanes and a toll booth. But Christian, the student in our dialogue, summarizes the wisdom here perfectly. He asks, so wisdom asks, what can this relationship naturally hold? Not, what do I wish it would become?
What can this relationship naturally hold? If you want to stop feeling exhausted by the people in your life, you have to stop trying to force them to hold traffic they aren't built for.
And Doc C responds to Christian by saying, beautiful. Acceptance begins there. You have to accept the road for what it actually is.
Yeah.
You don't stand on a quiet neighborhood street and yell at it for not being a highway. You appreciate the quiet street for its specific beauty and specific function, and when you have heavy cargo to move, you take it to the interstate.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
What if I look at my internal map and I realize I have a ton of heavy cargo, like I'm going through a really tough time, but I don't have any interstates? What if all I have are neighborhood streets? The temptation is going to be to overload them anyway, because the cargo has to go somewhere.
Right. Yeah, that is a very real, very painful human dilemma. But the framework would suggest that overloading a neighborhood street won't actually move your cargo. It will just destroy the street.
So you lose the cargo and the friend.
Exactly. You end up with unmoved cargo and a ruined friendship. If you lack interstates, the work of maturity is to begin building them, or to seek out professional interstates like therapists or counselors whose entire architectural purpose is to carry heavy, oversized loads. You cannot force a capacity that doesn't exist.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So we've mapped out the districts, we've identified the roads, and we figured out their structural capacity. But a city isn't just static roads and empty buildings. Things are moving through it constantly.
Right. There's always activity.
Which leads us into the next major concept from the Spectrix material, Principle 4, relational flow.
Yes. If capacity is the size and strength of the road, flow is the actual traffic moving on it. Doc C references a broader concept here called the plex, which seems to be the foundational theory from part 1. But the core idea is that life moves, information moves, encouragement moves.
Correction moves, opportunity moves.
Exactly. Relationships are not just static people standing next to each other in a room. They are active, dynamic channels.
There are pipelines.
Yeah.
And just like any pipeline, whether it's plumbing or an oil rig, sometimes they flow perfectly, and sometimes they get horribly, hopelessly clogged.
Precisely. Doc C observes that some channels remain remarkably clear while others become naturally blocked. And I'm sure you and the listener have experienced this. Have you ever noticed how with some people, a conversation just flows effortlessly?
Oh yeah, like time just disappears.
Right. You sit down for coffee, 3 hours pass in a blink, and you leave feeling energized, understood, and deeply at peace. The resources of encouragement in life are moving through that relational channel without any obstruction.
Oh, absolutely. But then with other people, every single interaction feels like wading waist deep through thick mud.
Yes.
You have to constantly repeat yourself, you feel chronically misunderstood, and you walk away feeling totally drained. Doc C says some relationships naturally produce peace, while others consistently produce confusion.
And this raises an immensely practical question, right? What do we actually do when we identify a blocked channel? Because the human instinct is usually to grab a metaphorical sledgehammer and start smashing away at the blockage, trying to force the flow.
We start swinging wildly.
We do. We argue, we over-explain ourselves, we send long, like paragraphs-long text messages demanding that the other person understand our perspective. We think if we just hammer hard enough, the flow will open up.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though, because the source gives us a crucial caveat that completely short-circuits that instinct. Doc C says that noticing a blocked channel or recognizing that a relationship consistently produces confusion is observation, not condemnation.
That distinction is the hallmark of the relational maturity Doxy was talking about in the very beginning.
Yeah.
You are acting as a navigator of your own life, not a judge of theirs. You are simply observing the reality of the flow. And then the mentor delivers this incredibly poetic, Zen-like piece of wisdom to drive the point home. He says, a river doesn't argue with a stone. It simply reveals where flow is possible.
I have to say, reading that line, a river doesn't argue with a stone, completely stopped me in my tracks.
It's so good.
Think about how much time, how much emotional energy, and how many years of our lives we waste arguing with the stones in our relational rivers.
Too much time.
We sit there yelling at a boulder like, move! You're blocking my flow. Why won't you let me through? Why can't you just see my side of this?
And the boulder just sits there.
Meanwhile, the river doesn't do that. The river just naturally, effortlessly finds its way around the stone.
Yeah.
It finds the path of least resistance.
Because the river doesn't take the stone's presence personally. It doesn't view the stone as a moral failure of the landscape. It simply acknowledges the obstruction and adjusts its course to reveal where flow is possible.
Right.
And this connects deeply back to setting healthy limits. If you find that the flow of deep emotional intimacy is constantly blocked by a specific stone in a friendship, maybe they just aren't capable of empathy or they get defensive, you don't have to blow up the relationship.
You don't have to write them off as a villain.
You simply adjust the flow. Maybe that channel is only meant for the flow of lighthearted hobbies or discussing sports or professional networking. You let the river find its natural course without argument.
It is so incredibly freeing to realize
Yeah.
you can just stop arguing with the stones. You don't have to change them. You could just let them sit there and flow around them.
It's a huge relief.
But, of course, just because we accept the landscape doesn't mean we have no responsibilities.
No, not at all.
The city isn't going to just magically take care of itself while we float down the river. And that brings us to the fifth principle, relational stewardship.
Right. If we want those channels to remain clear, and if we want the roads to faithfully hold their capacity over the long haul, they require intentional upkeep. Doc C states plainly that every city requires maintenance.
Potholes need fixing.
Exactly. Roads crack over time, bridges age, harbors require dredging because sediment builds up, walls require repair. Relationships, he argues, are structurally no different. Healthy relationships aren't simply discovered by accident and then put on autopilot forever. They are actively stewarded.
I think our culture sells us a highly romanticized, very dangerous idea about relationships in this regard.
Oh, totally.
We buy into this myth that if a connection is meant to be, whether it's a best friendship, a marriage, or family bond, it will just effortlessly sustain itself. We think hard work means it's a bad match. But the source completely rejects that fantasy.
It absolutely rejects it. Doc C provides a very specific, grounded list of what this maintenance actually looks like in practice. He lists listening, apologizing, showing gratitude, being present, keeping commitments, and speaking truth with compassion.
And he emphasizes that these are not just polite, abstract virtues to strive for when we feel like it. He literally calls them infrastructure maintenance.
They're the literal mortar.
Right. They're the mortar holding the bricks of the relationship together.
Let's really look at the psychology of that list, because it covers both the gentle and the highly rigorous aspects of maintenance. Showing gratitude and being present, those are the routine sweeps of the street, right?
Yeah, sweeping the sidewalks.
They keep things clean, pleasant, and functional on a daily basis. But apologizing and speaking truth with compassion, that is the heavy machinery. That is getting down on the dirt and repairing a cracked foundation.
Yeah, apologizing is fixing a pothole before it becomes a massive sinkhole that swallows a car. But let's talk about why we don't do this. Why do we defer maintenance? Because we do, all the time.
We really do.
I think we defer it out of pride, or maybe just out of exhaustion. Or, going back to the myth of the effortless relationship, we think, well, they've known me for 10 years. They know I love them. I shouldn't have to explicitly thank them or apologize. They should just know.
Right. We rely on the history of the structure to sustain the present. But Christian, the student, picks up on the danger of this immediately. He says he likes the term infrastructure maintenance because people often think relationships fail overnight. We think they just suddenly explode.
Yeah, out of nowhere.
And Doxy's response to this is one of the most sobering moments in the text. He says, they rarely do. Most cities don't collapse because of earthquakes. They collapse because maintenance stopped.
That is a staggering observation. Most cities don't collapse because of earthquakes.
It gives you chills.
It really does. Because when a friendship ends, or a marriage dissolves, or a business partnership goes bankrupt, we always look for the earthquake. We look for the massive betrayal, the huge blow-up argument, the single catastrophic event we can point to and say, that is what ruined everything.
But Doxy is suggesting that relational collapse is almost always the result of long-term, deferred maintenance. The listener needs to deeply internalize this. It rarely was an earthquake. It was the 100 times you were on your phone instead of listening. It was the 50 apologies you swallowed because you wanted to be right.
Ouch.
It was the slow, quiet fading of gratitude, where you just started expecting them to do things for you. Over time, the rebar rusts, the concrete cracks, and eventually, the bridge doesn't need an earthquake to fall. It just gives way under its own neglected weight.
Really forces you to look at your own relational architecture right now and ask some tough questions. Like, what maintenance have I been putting off? What bridge in my life desperately needs some structural repair today?
Have I stopped showing gratitude to the people who drive on my daily interstate?
Right. Have I been present or have I been distracted? It challenges you to take ownership of the city you are building. Because if you don't maintain it, you lose the right to be shocked and act like a victim when it crumbles.
Absolutely. You cannot blame the structural integrity if you refuse to pick up a wrench. However, the framework is sophisticated enough to acknowledge a deeper, much more complex, and frankly painful truth. What happens when you do all the maintenance? What if you apologize, you listen actively, you show profound gratitude, you keep every commitment, you do everything right, and the relationship still changes, it still fades?
Okay, this is the part that keeps people up at night.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where the framework transitions from the concept of static position to the concept of movement, which introduces us to Principle 6, relational gravity.
This might be the most profound, emotionally resonant section of the entire source document. Up until now, we've been talking about the city as if it's mostly stationary. We've mapped the districts, paved the roads, cleared the rivers, done the maintenance.
Right.
But the mentor steps back in here and fundamentally shifts the entire paradigm. He says, earlier, we spoke of position. Now let us speak of movement.
Doxy takes this prompt and explains that gravity is the reason why relationships naturally, inevitably change over time, regardless of how much maintenance you do. It is a fundamental law of physics applied to human connection.
Okay, break that down for us.
He says, as we mature, our values change. Responsibilities change. Vision changes. Purpose changes.
And all of that growth, all of that maturation fundamentally shifts our gravitational field.
Precisely. If we are genuinely exploring how maturity changes our gravitational influence on our close friends, we have to visualize the physics of it. Think of yourself as a planet.
Okay, I'm a planet.
When you are young, say, in college or your early 20s, your mass, which consists of your values, your life experience, your responsibilities, is a certain size. And because of that specific mass, you hold certain friendships in a specific, highly stable orbit around you.
We're all hanging out in the same solar system.
Exactly. You are all vibrating at the same frequency, pulling at each other with the same gravity. But as you grow, as you mature, you gain mass. You develop new, perhaps more complex visions for your life.
You get married, have kids.
You take on heavier responsibilities, a demanding career, a family, a mortgage, a spiritual awakening. Your fundamental gravitational pull alters.
And the result of that shifting gravity, as Doxy points out, is that the orbits of the people around you are forced to change. He says some relationships become stronger. They get pulled closer into your new, heavier gravitational center.
Yeah.
Others become quieter. They drift into a wider, looser orbit. And still others. They leave orbit entirely. They float away into space.
It's just the laws of physics.
Now, I need to stop and speak for the listener here, because intellectually, this makes perfect sense. But emotionally, letting people drift out of orbit hurts like hell.
Oh, it's devastating.
It feels incredibly personal. When someone you were once so close to, someone you shared a daily interstate with, someone you thought would be in your inner circle forever, starts to drift away, it feels like a failure. It feels like a betrayal or like abandonment. How do we navigate that? How do we keep from feeling bitter or clinging to them and demanding they stay in an orbit that no longer fits?
That is the exact agonizing tension Christian brings up in the dialogue. He voices that universal human fear. He asks, so departure isn't always abandonment.
And what does Doc C say?
He offers an insight that, if truly embraced, is the ultimate sign of relational maturity. He replies, no, sometimes departure is completion.
Departure is completion.
It is a radical reframing of loss. It completely removes the ego from the equation of human connection. Doc C unpacks the reasons why people leave our orbit, and none of them are rooted in malice or failure.
Right.
He says sometimes people leave because they simply no longer belong in your new gravitational field. The alignment, the resonance just isn't there anymore, and that's nobody's fault.
It just is what it is.
Sometimes they leave because they have fulfilled their specific assignment in your life. The purpose of the connection has been achieved. And sometimes they leave because their own internal growth, their own shifting gravity, requires a completely different horizon.
They need a different horizon. It's so deeply respectful of the other person's journey. Because we have this selfish tendency to think if they were a real friend, they would stay with me forever, exactly as we were.
Yes.
But what if their purpose in your life was only meant for a specific season? What if they were meant to be a bridge that helped you cross a very specific river, a bad breakup, a tough job transition, a period of grief, and now you're safely on the other side and they're on a different path?
Yeah.
To demand they stay is to demand they stop growing.
Exactly. Viewing friendships as completed rather than failed changes everything. It shifts your personal perspective from a state of mourning and bitterness to a state of profound gratitude.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
You can look back at a friend who is no longer in your orbit, someone who drifted away, and instead of feeling resentment, you can say, thank you. Our time together was beautiful, and it was complete. It allows you to honor the relationship according to its true nature, rather than demanding it defy the laws of relational gravity.
That is so freeing. It allows you to let go without resentment, which is honestly one of the hardest things a human being can do.
For sure.
And crucially, it prepares you for the final and perhaps most revealing part of the map. Because when those gravitational fields shift, and when the inevitable storms of life hit your city, that is when you finally see the true, undeniable map of your relational topology.
The ultimate test.
Exactly. And that brings us to the seventh and final major principle: open harbors.
The mentor introduces this principle with a very quiet, deeply earned observation. He says, one of the quietest blessings in life is discovering whose harbor remains open.
A harbor, a place of refuge from the storm, a place where the water is calm and you are safe from the elements.
Yes. Doc C explains that there are seasons when life tests every single relationship you have. But he makes a crucial distinction about how life tests them. It isn't always through a dramatic, cinematic argument. It isn't always through betrayal or conflict. Life often tests our relational map simply through need.
Through raw, vulnerable need.
Like when you lose your job unexpectedly, when you get a terrifying medical diagnosis, when your heart is completely broken. When the storm hits, you are suddenly looking around your internal city, desperate for a safe place to dock your ship.
And in those moments of deep need, the actual, factual topology of your life is revealed. Doc C asks a series of piercing questions about the people in your life. Who answers? Who remembers? Who makes room? Who quietly says, come alongside?
Wow.
He points out that hardship does not create relationships. Hardship reveals them.
That distinction is so important. Hardship doesn't forge the bond. It tests the tensile strength of the bond that was already there. It reveals the map.
It really does.
It shows you who is actually a structurally sound harbor and who's just a decorative ornamental bridge. Because you might have thought someone was a deep harbor because you had a great time together at parties, or because you shared a lot of laughs, or because they always liked your posts on social media.
The fun friend. Right. But when the Category 5 hurricane hits, and you try to sail into their district seeking shelter, you might find the harbor is completely closed. Or you might find the water is way too shallow to hold the weight of your ship.
And this is where the risk of deep, permanent cynicism is highest.
Oh, absolutely.
When we realize that someone we thought was a harbor is actually close to us in our time of desperate need, the pain is blinding. The natural human reaction is to become incredibly cynical, to build massive defensive walls and to declare to the world that people can't be trusted. We say, I'm never letting anyone in again.
So what does this all mean for us? How do we navigate that profound disappointment without becoming hardened, bitter, isolated people?
Christian, acting as the proxy for the listener, asks exactly that. He says, so we don't become cynical, we become navigators.
Ah, navigators.
And Doxy affirms this entirely. He says, exactly, charts aren't judgments, they're observations.
Charts aren't judgments, they're observations. If we go back to the mentor's approach to all this, that knowledge must become wisdom, he is teaching us to observe the map objectively, even when it breaks our hearts.
Yeah.
If you sail toward a friend during a storm and find their harbor closed, you don't curse the friend. You don't spend the rest of your life declaring them a terrible, selfish person.
You just update the map.
You simply take out your metaphorical map, cross out the word harbor next to their name, and write in whatever they actually are. A casual acquaintance, a fair-weather friend, a neighborhood street. You update your chart. You observe reality.
You become a master navigator. A ship's navigator doesn't get angry at the ocean for having shallow reefs, right? That would be a massive waste of energy.
Right, they'd just be yelling at the water.
They just steer around them. They learn where the safe, deep waters are. They learn whose harbor actually remains open. This entire framework, everything we have discussed today, is building toward this ultimate realization, stopping the endless, exhausting demand that people be who we want them to be, and learning to expertly navigate who they actually are.
Which brings us perfectly to the final synthesis of this deep dive. The overarching theme we've been circling this whole time is that the great, hard-won freedom of adulthood is stopping the demand.
Stopping the demand, yes.
It's stopping the demand that every single neighborhood road become a high-speed interstate highway. It's stopping the demand that every casual acquaintance become chosen family. It's stopping the demand that every pleasant, surface-level conversation has to turn into deep emotional intimacy.
The mentor offers a final reflection that ties the entire philosophy together into a single, actionable truth. He says, a wise person does not spend life trying to relocate everyone. They simply learn where each person truly lives.
Don't spend your life trying to relocate everyone. Wow.
It's so simple, but so profound.
Stop trying to drag the barber into the therapist's office. Stop trying to force the annual reunion friend into a daily commute. Let them live where they naturally, structurally live in your relational architecture.
Because when we do this, as Doxy concludes, something beautiful and sustainable happens. Deep peace begins to replace chronic frustration. Genuine gratitude replaces toxic entitlement. Sharp discernment replaces constant disappointment. And the city within your internal world of human connection begins to actually flourish.
Because it's aligned with reality.
Exactly. It flourishes because it is finally operating according to its actual design, not some forced artificial expectation.
It's just a brilliant framework for protecting your own peace while still genuinely loving the people around you for who they are. But the source document doesn't let us off the hook quite that easily, does it?
No, it definitely does not.
Right at the very end, in the closing section, Doxy drops a cliffhanger that flips this entire hour-long conversation completely on its head.
He does. It's a masterful, slightly terrifying turn. He notes that next time, they will ask perhaps the most difficult question yet. We've spent this entire deep dive mapping out where everyone else lives in our city.
Right.
We've talked extensively about their capacity, their flow, their gravity, their open or closed harbors in relation to us.
But then Doxy asks the ultimate mirror question. He says, if relationships occupy different places within our city, where do we live within theirs?
It completely shifts the spotlight. Relational topology isn't only about mapping others to serve our needs. It's about discovering the actual address we ourselves occupy inside someone else's world.
So that is the provocative thought I want to leave you with today. I want you to turn the map around. You spent all this time figuring out who the bridges and harbors are in your life, but what are you in theirs?
Yeah, that's the real test.
Are you acting like a demanding daily interstate for someone who only has the capacity to offer you a neighborhood street? Are you trying to force your way into their inner residential sanctum when they've clearly zoned you for the commercial district? Are you maintaining the infrastructure of your side of the connection? Or are you letting the bridges rust while blaming them for the collapse?
It requires immense, almost uncomfortable humility to ask those questions, to realize that you might not be the center of someone else's gravity, even if they are the center of yours.
Exactly. It's humbling, but it is the final step toward true relational wisdom. So I invite you to sit with that question this week explore how you might be showing up in the relational architecture of the people you love. Because remember what we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive. What if there was nothing wrong with you and nothing wrong with them? What if you just misunderstood the address? Until next time, keep mapping your city.